Hello everyone, welcome back to another Mr. Encyclopedia video, and today we're going to be talking about a Python topic. So we're coming back to Python, then C++, which I'll get to later on, but right now I want to focus on a few short segmented videos, especially on Python, which will be really more, I believe, helpful than more compiled versions. And today we're going to be talking about functions, so stay tuned. So first off, let's just define what a function basically just means. And a function is just a block of code that can be reused whenever it's called upon. That's just what a function is, and it doesn't get any simpler than that. So keeping that definition in mind, I just want to show you how a basic function would look like. We're not going to go through any more like advanced problems. It's essentially just going to be an introduction to functions, and this is more of a beginner course which you want to continue in like beginner series in Python. So first, let's create a function, and this function, as usually your first function would be, is probably to greet somebody, and that's what we're going to do right now. So we're going to greet a specific name when you input that name, and the function is going to do the greeting. So that may sound a bit complicated. Let me just code it out. So whenever you write a function, we always have to put def, almost like, you know, definition, just the def of definition. So you're basically defining the function, and you need to put the name of the function. So let's say greet is the name, because you want to greet somebody, right? And then in the parentheses, you have to put a parameter. And the parameter is essentially whatever the user calls upon, and it's essentially like, you can think of it almost like a variable, but it's more than just that. So it's better if I just show you, because it's kind of difficult to explain. So here is a parameter. Let's just say name, and essentially what this means is that since we're trying to say, or the user is trying to input whatever name it is, right? And in this case, we're actually going to be inputting it right in the code, but the input, let's say Alice, right? Alice is the name, and the function is going to say hello and whatever the name is. So it's going to say hello Alice, and that's the whole point, is that name Alice is the substitute of that, and we'll be talking about the two terms. One is parameter. We'll be talking about arguments, which is the second term that's essentially used to describe that parameter. So this, in this case, whatever's inside the function, or whatever that is being defined by the function, that's what's the parameter when it's inside the function, just simply. And you have to put a colon, and now you can start to write what your function has to do. So you named it, you gave it the proper parameter, and obviously functions can have one or more, but here we're just trying to keep it simple again, so we're just doing the name. So here we have def greet name so far. So what do we want to do? We want to print out hello and that name. So typically you can say hello, comma, and then plus name, and then plus maybe exclamation mark, but that's kind of tedious. It's kind of boring to just type that all in, and it takes more time. So now I just want to talk about something that's not really related to functions in specifically, but it is going to be definitely helpful whenever you code whatever you want, regardless of if it's a function or not. If you want to put a variable inside like a string, then you can use a thing called f strings. And so f strings are essentially, just like the name suggests, you put an f and then there's a string, f string. And so make sure to always put that f. It's important, that because if you don't put that f, the method's not going to work. So when you put that f, now it becomes an f string. So what's the point of doing this? So instead of doing that, what I just typed in, hello, comma, plus that name, plus the exclamation mark, you can just do hello, and whatever variable you want, you don't need to like make a plus and that variable, you just need to put curly braces within that f string. And since here our variable, okay, the parameter is a name, we want to put name inside that curly brace, and then we can just put exclamation mark. So essentially this is equivalent to saying brand, what I just showed, like hello, name, exclamation mark. essentially just the exact same thing. Okay, so that's exactly just like I told you, we're just trying to keep it simple. So that's all our function's gonna do. You can have more than one function. Obviously, there's no limit on how much functions you have. And later on, when we get to it's more complicated, but we're gonna talk about classes, which is since Python is an object-oriented programming language, classes are a characteristic of Python as well as others such as C++. So we're going to talk about that in Python and C++. Essentially, they're the same idea. It's just a group of various variables, functions. Essentially, it's like the primary characteristic. If you want to describe, let's say, a dog, you can have brown, like the skin color, you can have the age, you can have multiple different functions for it, and you can always refer back to that class. It's much more, like I told, it's a bit more advanced than functions, but we'll get to that later. But I just want to tell you that it uses functions. Yeah, so now let's go back, or let's go ahead and let's print out whatever our name is. So in order to use that function, when we exit the function, in order to recall that function, you say the name, and then you whatever you want your name to be in this case. So since we're saying names, I'm gonna say Alice. So now if we run this, it's gonna say hello Alice. So that's essentially what a function is. Obviously, you can just print out hello Alice, but the whole point of this is that when we write more code inside the function, we're gonna realize how useful it is, how we can just reuse it by just calling by that name and just putting whatever we want in that parentheses. And this is what I told about how there are two types, basically parameters and arguments. So remember, when name is a parameter because it's linked to that function, but when we're outside the function and we're inputting that thing back into the parameter, or substituting that parameter, which means Alice, since Alice is the substitution for the name parameter, this is going to be an argument. Alice is the argument of this function. Essentially, the Alice, whatever name you put in here, in this case, is going to be the argument. And this can range from multiple, like obviously there can be more than one arguments. It depends on how many parameters you have. Sometimes you can define parameters as equal to 0 or like as equal to none, so that you may not even need to include that as a later argument. And that's more complicated. This is just more, like I told you, beginner's course, but this is all you need to know really as you're starting out in Python for what a function is. It's just a reusable piece of block code, which means this entire thing is a function, and whatever it does, like the execution, what comes underneath that name. So like in this case, it's just to print the name. And also we talked about f strings, how they can be useful, not just in functions, but of course in like other areas as well, and greet. And now keep in mind, although this is our practice function, there are many functions just return something. So I guess I can just, yeah, move this here. We can just do a new one. We don't need this anymore. But when we talk about return functions, it's going to be, I guess, a bit different. Only the execution part is different. Actually, let's not create a new one. We can just use this. So instead of having print hello name, essentially what you can do is that you can just return this thing, because obviously printing is going to be much more efficient in this case, but when we return something, that just means that we need to print it out again, whatever we want to print out. And of course, many times when you use the return, it's not really going to be for printing. It's going to be for because obviously you can't print with the return statement. It's just to return that value when that function is being called on. So in this case, when you say greet Alice, Alice is going to be substitution for that name, and then when we call on hello Alice, essentially it's going to return hello Alice, but it's not going to print it because we never said print hello name like we did before. We're saying return. So how does this work now? How will we get to see hello Alice in the output? Because obviously it's not going to print anything. We never said print statement. So what we need to do then is that obviously greet Alice, we need to keep it here. And since we didn't include a print statement and we want to print this out, we will print over that greet string. And yeah, that's just it. Because if you think about it, this value is equivalent to hello Alice without it being printed out. We know that this is hello Alice, but in order to print it out, it's almost like a string. So you say print greet Alice, and it's gonna do the same thing as that, what we saw before. So that's essentially just what return statements. Obviously, like I told before, return statements are not always to use like print out out of the function and then getting what we returned back. It's not just used for that. It's obviously used for more particular purposes, maybe on return a function. Like when we made that calculator project, if we use a function, then we would return a plus b, like that. So it's maybe like for values, maybe for other sorts of data, but the whole point is that return, it doesn't print or execute anything, it just returns back that value, and then it's up to us to execute it through another command like print. And so yeah, essentially that's all for a function. I feel like it's pretty simple when you just talk about functions on a high level. Obviously, like I told you, it can be more complicated. You can have multiple in class, and we'll talk about all that later on in upcoming videos. But for now, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.